Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to another episode of Fun Palais Podcast. As we enter into story time today, we have a special guest with us today. We have Lydia, who has over 25 years in the health and wellness industry as a registered dietitian, with the greatest part of her career working in media. Following some pivotal life experiences that included being widowed without warning, navigating cancer, and a period of unhealthy coping mechanisms, Lydia began to incorporate a holistic approach to well-being that focused on the health of her body, mind, and soul. Lydia, welcome. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Shirley. I'm so happy to be here and chat with you and your audience. I hope they get something from the story that I have to share because it's been quite a journey and it's led me to a phenomenal place where I just feel spreading my message and my learnings from my journey are really valuable to a lot of people.
Wonderful. And we're glad to have you. Every story is unique, is different, is special. And believe me, someone is going to resonate with your story because there's zillions of people out there.
Exactly, exactly. And I love what you just said about every story is unique. And, that's sort of my mantra that got me to doing the work I do, and it was about discovering your own uniqueness. My signature program is called Discovering YOU, which stands for your own uniqueness, because we all do have our own stories. And even if we share similar experiences, I find everybody responds, reacts to whatever life hands them in a different
Mhm.
way. And I feel very fortunate that life has gifted me the opportunity to navigate through some really challenging moments in a way that was very positive and that helped me really turn inward and discover a lot about my inner essence and my inner strength and my inner spirit, which I think was really valuable to share with the bigger world, with the world at large. And it really does really fall very much in line with what I've done my entire life in my professional career. Because, as you mentioned in the intro, for 25 years I was a registered
Mhm.
dietitian, and so my whole business and reason for being and the things that I love to do most were to educate people on well-being, but it was mostly centered around physical well-being in terms of nourishment of body, taking care of your body. And, one of my favorite aspects in my career, as you also mentioned, was working in media. I found that to be a really sweet spot for me, being on a stage and engaging with people. But what happened to me prior to these pivotal life moments was I found myself having this little bit of an inner yearning, an inner calling to be doing more. And I think it happens to a lot of women around midlife, where you just say, what more am I meant to be doing with my life? We identify very much with our roles as mothers and as partners, as caregivers to our parents, in our familial roles, whether, as a sibling, and in our careers. We identify with all of those parts of our lives, but at some point there's this inner calling that says there's more I'm meant to be doing. We all get there. I don't care who you are. I don't care what stage of life you're in, but it happens to us all. For me, it was in my early 40s. And, I felt kind of guilty even saying it out loud because I kind of had that perfect life, with a good career, the beautiful marriage, the beautiful home, the three kids, the white picket fence. Okay, not really, but, as an analogy. And, I sort of felt guilty voicing it, but, you can't ignore a calling
Yeah.
when something's tugging at you, and there's more you're meant on this, in this lifetime to be doing. So I voiced that to my husband. We had a great relationship. And I said, there's more I'm meant to be doing. I'm struggling with inner happiness here. And he said, well, just do what makes you happy. Just shrugged his shoulders, just do what makes you happy. I'm like, okay, sounds really simple, but that's what I'm searching for. And the other thing he said to me was, try different things, do what makes you happy, but also don't focus so much on the search. Just enjoy the present moment, just really enjoy what's happening here in front of you. And I really took that to heart because he was really good at that. He was really good at being present, especially given that he was really busy in the work he did. He traveled a lot and he was so good at being present when he was at home with all of us. And I always admired that. So, I definitely took his words to heart. So, fast forward after we have this conversation a few months later, and as I mentioned, he's his job requires a lot of travel. And over time, I'm seeing it take a huge toll on him. I really am. And I expressed my concern to him one day. I say, I don't like what's happening here. And he said, it is a grind and it's going to be about a year and a half to 2 years of this type of pace. But I love what I'm doing. I said, okay, long as you're happy, right? Remember what I said about do what makes you happy? And we always had that check-in point. So one day I'm dropping him off at the airport, Shirley, for what to me seems like an insane trip. It's a 5-day whirlwind trip to China. And it's not just one destination, it's multiple destinations. And I know that he doesn't travel well. And I know that time zones affect him and all of that. And my heart was really, really heavy leaving him at the airport when I dropped him off. And 3 days later, I got a phone call at 3 in the morning with the voice on the other end from his boss telling me, "We don't know what happened, but your husband is dead." So my husband died over in China right after I had just had this heavy heart and feeling that something was going to happen. And as devastating as the news was, and it was, and trust, I'm going to continue on further into this interview about sort of the journey, but something really interesting happened for me in those really early hours because it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Of course, my pragmatic, practical side says I don't need to wake anybody up and tell them this news right now because the news is the news. It's final. So I just sat with the news, and I had this overarching number one sense of him, his energy, his presence around me, and I felt this incredible connection with him and so much love and gratitude for what we had shared in our relationship together. And I knew in that moment, like almost instantaneously, that something bigger was at work in my life. Because here I had been this woman who was searching for something more, who had this inner restlessness, who didn't know what that was all about or how I was going to find it. And now I'm filled with gratitude and love, and memories are flooding me. And honestly, so grateful. And so in the months that followed his passing, and to this day, and it's been 8 years, I really worked on developing and maintaining that connection to something that was bigger than me, something that I couldn't see, yet ultimately was inherently inside of me. And what that ended up looking like, Shirley, was inner peace. I think what I was searching for, the missing piece, was my inner peace. That was the thing I needed to feel that happiness from the inside out. And once I discovered that that was what was missing for me, and once I discovered it and how to nurture it and foster it and bring it into my life on a regular basis, I knew that that was the message I needed to go out and share with people from this stage now. Where before my message was about physical well being, now it was about nourishing your body, your mind, and your soul. And I knew that was a critical message, especially for a lot of women, because again, we get lost under those hats that we wear. We do so much for everybody else, and we let ourselves take, low priority on the scale of in terms of importance and taking care of ourselves. And I've always believed that if you're not well and if you're not nurturing yourself, then you're no good to anybody else anyway. So it's not a selfish act. It's actually somewhat of a selfless act because you can give the very best of yourself to everything and everyone around you when you're in a good space. So that became my mantra and that became the work I did. And it was all really rooted in discovering my own unique needs. And I wanted to go out and help inspire and empower women to do the same for themselves.
You know, Lydia, no one ever thinks about their significant other leaving them. And you're the first to share your story on my show with your significant other leaving you. How many years had you been married
We were married 20 years.
at that moment? Okay. Were the kids big?
11, 14, and 15.
Oh my God. You lost your husband and now you have become a single mother all within 3 days.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know what question to throw at you first because it makes me emotional because I'm thinking of my man's downstairs. I could not imagine I can't even begin to say in words what I would feel like because you don't know until you are in that situation. So I don't know why people are always quick to judge about everyone's experience and situation because I don't know what the fuck I would do if I was in that situation. So I cannot, everything I'm saying right now is a hypothetical based on if I was in that situation. How do you even find the
Well,
courage to move on? You have an 11, a 14, and what was the other age?
15,
15.
15. Yeah.
How do you find the
Well,
courage?
I'll tell you how I found the courage. It was in the early days. I recognized two things really quickly. I knew that the journey would be long and hard, but I knew that I would be okay. And I knew in those early days because he had passed away in China. And I mean, there were some logistics and some hoops. I didn't fly to China. I let his company take care of all of that because in my mind, he died on their watch and my place was with my family. But I had a revolving door of people come through my home for the next week and a half. I had so much love and support. And I knew that these early days would be the easy days because of all of that love and support. And over time, when people went back to their own lives, that's when it would really set in that I had to figure this out on my own. But because I'd had that immediate connection to something that I felt was bigger than me, I felt that the universe was opening up its doors to me. I really, really, really felt that his passing was my spiritual awakening. And so because I'd experienced that so quickly and so early on, I knew that was something that I really wanted to nurture and work on, as I mentioned. And so I did. That became my focus. But the story, life is never linear. And the story goes on a year and a half after he passed away. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And I remember when I got the news, not thinking too much about it because if you know anything about cancer and thyroid cancer, it's a pretty self-contained cancer. So usually, it's not too much to worry about. There's not a big risk of it spreading to other parts of the body. Surgery is involved, a treatment is involved, and usually you're pretty good. In my case, I ended up having two surgeries in the space of 9 months because the cancer they didn't get all of it the first time around, but there was a risk to me losing my voice. And I remember thinking, okay, what is the message here? Because you've just lost your husband and now you may lose your voice, and yet you want to go out and share this message with people in a big way. You want people to understand how important it is to get in touch with your authentic self and to live from that place so that you can be your very best self in everything you do. Um, and so I did. I went out and spoke on stages. I did keynotes and I delivered workshops. And not that long ago, actually, I was published in a wonderful book called Ignite Your Inner
Mhm.
Spirit, which was very fitting. Um, but I think, all of that showed me that, yes, you know what it is you need to be doing in this lifetime. But again, because life isn't linear, I also didn't take some very critical steps after my husband's passing and after my cancer, which were to really process and get maybe some external help. I dealt with all of it on my own to the point, surely, where because the cancer happened so soon after my husband died, I sort of brushed it under the rug as a really not even important occurrence in my life. As far as everyone was concerned, Lydia has to have some surgery, but I swept it under the rug. I've got this. It's not a problem. It's no big deal. A, because I didn't want to be that woman who had just lost her husband and now had cancer. I will never be a victim. That's not who I am. And I needed to keep it small for the important people in my life who were really affected by the death of their father or their son or their brother. I had to keep what was happening with me really small because they were all still struggling with everything that had happened already. His death didn't affect just me, it affected a lot of people. So in hindsight, looking back, I did myself a huge disservice by not really dealing and allowing myself to heal fully. And so what ended up happening then was, I was still that very steady, strong, resilient person by day. But when I would get home at night from whatever it was I was doing, my work, what have you, and shut the door, I turned to some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms for a lot of years. Wine became something that, where in the past was something I did socially, it started to become my everyday. And so, you go down that path, and then all of a sudden I say, okay, but I really want to be speaking to people about nourishing your inner well being and living authentically. And yet there's this other dark side of me that people don't see. That's really my shut off button, whether it's filling a void, whether it's just shutting out everything that's that mind chatter that's happening, whatever purpose it's serving, it is a part of my life. And I have to acknowledge that this has become a regular part of my life, and it's not aligning with the rest of everything else I am, everything I've experienced, and everything I want to be out there sharing with the world. So, is a number of years of navigating all of these different pieces of my life to get to a point where I finally said, okay, who do you want to be and how do you want to show up? And what feels authentic and aligned for you, Lydia? What brings you inner peace, and how do you hold on to that space, and how do you be the most authentic version of yourself every single day so that you can go out and do what I'm doing right here with you now and share your story and inspire people? And so it meant walking away from, that relationship, the alcohol. It meant making some decisions in my personal life, removing toxic people or putting some distance between myself and toxicity. It's really just getting in touch and honest with who you are and what serves you and honoring it. And it's such a hard thing for women to do. And that's why I want to work with women, because we don't give ourselves permission to do the very best we can for ourselves. And yet, when we do the very best for everybody else too.
I'm glad that you had so much self-aware. Granted, I know the way I'm saying it, I did hear you say wine became like your best friend. But now that
Mhm.
the fact that you have so much self-aware and you realize what was going on and what you needed to fix, and the fact that women do this all the time. You did not want to make yourself a victim. My husband just died. I was not going to be that woman now that is diagnosed with cancer. All I'm telling people is I'm just having a little procedure. This is something women do consistently and all the time. They make everything small, because we always want to wear this big cape and we can handle everything. And we don't want to be seen as weak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, and I know this without a doubt, had my husband not passed away, my cancer would have been a big deal, even though it was truly a cancer that I believed was very treatable and manageable. That's been 5 or 6 years since then, and I'm still monitored regularly, and I'm in good shape, so I don't even think about it anymore. Um, but you're right, and I don't know if it's that I didn't want to be perceived as being weak, or I just needed to really protect. I think I really got that lioness, that mama lioness thing going on, and I had to protect my cubs. It was the same way I responded, when my husband died. I just had to be really strong and resilient. There were different ways that I could have navigated my own emotions after that news, but I chose to pull on the things that were the best use of my energy. Like, for example, a lot of people get angry, or they want answers, or they demand this, or they point fingers. That's a very natural response to illness, to death, to whatever. I never went there. I wasn't going to allow my energy to be spent on anything that felt negative, that was going to deplete me. I needed to do things that were going to empower me. So, for whatever our motivations are, whether it's that we don't want to be perceived as weak, or whether we just have this protective like instinct that we need to provide to everybody else. But in the end, everybody has to go through, I think, all of the emotions a little bit
Mhm.
so that they can process fully. I'll tell you, to this day, Shirley, and I know that they say there's 7 stages of grief. And anger is one of them. I've never been angry to this day. I don't think I ever will be. I've had moments, when we've had like significant occasions for the children, and I think you should be here. But oh my goodness, I'll tell you, I was never a victim. In fact, my heart, my compassion, my sadness was for my husband who passed, because now he was going to be missing all of this wonder of the girls growing up and all of these occasions and all of these things. So my compassion was never really for myself. It was for everybody else.
I have a question for you, and I guess this is
Mhm.
hypothetical. So everyone's out here in relationships. And we all know relationships can be like a roller coaster. There are good days, there are bad days, but genuinely, for the most part, I want to believe that people are happy in the relationships than they are. I don't have any statistics, but I'm hoping it's a large number. Does that play a role in your relationship with your husband's passing? Because you did say you had a great relationship, and does that lighten the load for you?
150%. Absolutely, yes. And I will tell you, I just had this conversation with somebody about that very thing. Especially when someone dies suddenly, it's different when you have time to plan, when you have time to have conversations. And I know my dad died from cancer. So we had a beautiful year of conversations and moments that we could share in knowing what was coming. That wasn't the case with my husband. But we had such a great relationship. I can honestly say there were no words left unsaid. I never had a moment where I said, I wish I could have 5 more minutes so I could just say this. And I actually was on a podcast where that question was posed. They said, "What's that one more thing you would say if you knew it was the last time you were going to see someone before they left and you'd never see them again? What is that one more thing you would say?" And all I said was, "Thank you. Thank you," because he was just everything. He was such a great husband, great dad. We made so much quality time for each other. So I'm just grateful. And I think that's why I was able to feel that gratitude so soon in.
And I appreciate you saying that because even me myself, I know many times I've become selfish and not treat every day like it's going to be our last day. And I don't say kind and loving words, and we're talking to each other harshly, and we're taking full advantage of the quality time that we should be spending. But you don't want to think about death. You don't want to think about it.
No, we don't want to think about it. And yet it is a reality of life. And I think if you can look at this person as a gift in your life, knowing that they're not there forever, but that whatever your time together looks like is predestined. That was sort of your mutual soul's karmic agreement when you enter this lifetime. I knew based on all the things that I experienced that this was meant to happen exactly how it did and when it did so that I could go spread my wings. Now it was my time. I almost felt like he was doing this to me. I mean, your listeners can't see what I'm doing, but it's kind of like lifting me off the ground and just saying, now it's your time. Go spread your wings, sweetheart. That's what I felt, that all of the revelations I had so soon in and coming to the understanding very quickly of what my purpose was and what I was meant to do with everything that this journey had shown me was all very intentional. It was all part of the plan. So, but I totally agree with what you say. We take so much for granted. And I would say this as a piece of advice, not only say thank you to people, not just your significant other, but just not only just say thank you, tell them what you're thankful for. I think that's really important that people understand. I have 3, my girls are grown now, and I have one that's living, in Western Canada, so I don't see her a lot, but when I spent a week with her earlier in the summer, and we had such a beautiful week, but I made sure I told her what I was grateful for about our time together. Not just thank you, but, every single thing that was a highlight for me. And I have to look at life that way because I've been through it. I understand that anything could happen. So I want the kids, I want everyone that I interact with, and likewise reciprocally, I want to just have highlights. I want that highlight reel of the things that were really poignant moments. That's what life is about. You can never take those memories away. You have them with you always. So I think it's really important to make sure that people understand, you know, what you value about your time and your relationships with them. We can't do it enough, and it's an easy thing to do, and it's free. It's just freedom of speech. We just share what we want to let people know about how we feel. People are scared to show their hearts, and I find that this journey has shown me to the opposite. I'm so open with my heart, and the more we can be that way with each other, I mean, the world needs it. I think the world's craving that, right? We put this protective shield up in front of ourselves, and it's again my point about women being afraid to give themselves permission to do the work and to step into their authenticity. And yet we are the most heart-centered individuals on the planet, especially grown women, who've been through experiences. We really are. And so I think the more we can share that with people and live that way, it just, you open yourself up to people and they open themselves back up to you. It's reciprocal. It's a beautiful thing.
And you're definitely right because I am victim of scaring to be vulnerable. I'm terrified of opening my heart. A lot of it has to do with the hurt that has been put upon me over the years. And I'm getting better as the days and the weeks and the months go by, but I'm still working on stop trying to put a wall up all the time.
Yeah. It's, you know what? It's human nature to protect ourselves. And like I said, and as a mom, it was human nature for me to want to protect my cubs, right? So I kind of had to take on this really strong, superwoman demeanor. But little by little, and so it is a lot of times just baby steps in terms of opening up our heart, or just like breaking down that wall a little bit to reveal, an opportunity to bring something into our hearts and into our lives. You realize, and it does sometimes take a lot of work and small steps, but you realize how beautiful life is when you can live it with an open heart.
Mhm.
There's nothing better. It's work. Sometimes we have to wade through a lot of mucky stuff too, and face parts of ourselves or parts of our past, parts of our life experiences we've had that aren't good, but we have to look at them in order to kind of get over to the other side. And once we do, I think that destination, that spot where we land, is so sweet.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, how were the girls? Were all three daddy's girls? Because were they able to handle their father's death in a healthy way?
My older 2 were it's so great that you asked this question, because a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm sure a lot of people think, mothers, daughters, okay, well, better, he died than not you." And
Mm.
my older 2 were definitely daddy's girls. In fact, we were on a family vacation about 5 weeks before he passed away, and I remember having that very conversation with him. I said to him, "I'm jealous of your relationship with our daughters. They love you way more than they love me." And he said, "That's not true." He said, "They love you so much." I said, "No, no." But we did, he did acknowledge that the older 2 definitely had, a really tight bond with him. The younger one probably was still, she might have, if you asked her, she might have said she's on the fence. She was my baby. And that was just circumstantially, things going on in our lives. So, yes, I definitely recognize, Shirley, that my older 2 lost not only a parent, that's devastating for any child at that age or any age, but they lost their best friend. And he was a really, really engaged father. So for them, it was a huge shock. And then, of course, as I say to you, fast forward a little bit, and I'm reeling from that and being as strong as I can be, and my cancer. And I'm starting to turn to, an unsteady by night, steady by day and steady by night kind of existence. And that hurt the kids. They lost a parent already, and they needed someone who was really stable always, not just by day.
Mhm.
So that was hard, and the kids had to journey through that. And I will say the only saving grace through all of it was because my husband and I had the relationship we did, and we fostered a lot of open communication within our marriage, and the kids were witness to that. That was transferred over into my relationship with the girls. So we would have a lot of conversations. And a lot of times I was on the receiving end of them telling me, things that weren't working, but I received it, because in our family, we're all about communication, and it's not always easy communication, but you respect each other and you hear each other out. And so thank goodness that that was something that they picked up from our relationship and was fostered in our family, and it is to this day. And they were really supportive. I think the scarier part would have been if we stopped talking, and we never stopped talking.
That's good. That's good. Now, when it came to your cancer, I wanted to ask you because I had uh, some irregularities in my thyroid scan when they did it, and I went and I did a biopsy because I had a lot of, I think, lymph nodes or whatever,
Nodules, yeah, you
nodules.
probably had no, like, nodules. Yep.
So they wanted to do a biopsy of those nodules to make sure everything was benign. Was that very similar to what you did?
Yes, exactly. And what happened was I had been on thyroid medication just for an underactive thyroid for probably 20 years prior to this diagnosis, which one has nothing to do with the other. It's just hormones, right? But then I started noticing like just something that felt irregular in my throat. And my doctor did an exam and said, "Yeah, I think there's something I feel there." In my case, they couldn't get a biopsy in the surrounding area of the thyroid because there was something called calcification. So they took a biopsy from one of the nodules further up my neck, and that came back positive for cancer, and they knew just based on the area that it was all related to the thyroid. So the biopsy is really the tell all. it's going to give you the, and as long as, have you had your results yet?
Oh, yeah, this was in 2015. So now we do regular periodically checks of my blood levels. And then I think they
Yep.
want to do like, if my blood levels are off, then they do thyroid ultrasound. She normally will just use her hands
Correct.
to check
Yep.
me. Yeah.
Yep, exactly, exactly. So that the first marker is your blood work, and if it's showing irregularities, then they'll send you for an ultrasound to see if they see anything that looks irregular, then the biopsy and so on. It's a multi-tiered process. But the good news is, I'll tell you, my doctor said to me even after my second surgery, he said, "This has probably been growing for 10 to 15 years. It's a very slow growing thing. And the reality is, you are likely not going to have any problems again." As I mentioned, that was my last surgery was 6 years ago. In fact, I just saw him today. I see him annually, and he said, "No, you know what? If it comes back, I'd be very surprised, and if it did, it would be very slow growing. So just go enjoy your life."
Ex-
That's what he told
ex-
me, and that's what I'm doing.
exactly. Exactly. So now, here's the other question I have for you. How did you, now that your girls are older, what lesson do you want them to take from this whole situation of them losing their father young, um, everything you had to go through that they had to see? Um, they lost their best friend, your older two. What lesson do you feel as though the girls have taken from this? And how is your relationship? I know you said you just visited the first one, the second and the third. Do you have a good relationship with all three of your girls? And it seems like,
I have a
I'm sorry, it seems like what I wanted to say is
no, no.
like everything is like you try to keep it as positive as possible in your household. Open communication, express your feelings. And even when he was alive, even after Teal, he was gone, you still kept that consistent.
Mhm, mhm. And you know why? Because we kept his memory very alive. Some people, I think, when death happens, it becomes a taboo subject you don't talk about. We still have a running list, Shirley. I'm not kidding you. My kids will pull it out sometimes if we have an opportunity to be at the dining room table together, which isn't very often anymore. They called their dad Papa. A lot of people call their grandpa, but they call their dad Papa. So they'll pull out a running list of things Papa used to say because he had all these quirky things he would say. So we keep the humor alive. We keep his memory alive. Um, you know, and I think the first thing I said to the girls when I told them the news was, "We are still a unit, the 5 of us." I said, "He's just on a different path right now, and he's transitioning to the next stage, but we're still a unit." And I think that was the mentality that we maintained all throughout. So he's still very much alive in spirit. And of course, I'm very open when we talk about communication. I'm very open about my spiritual journey and the times that I have really felt his presence strongly in my life. I still feel very connected to him. I was thinking that today. His presence is always there. It's not in an interfering way. It's just I feel very, very connected to him. And I always will. So knowing that, having watched my journey, having watched my personal growth, having watched me navigate different challenges in my life, but always keeping spirit close, in terms of my own spiritual essence and well being, I think that's the proof the girls need to see that there's something in it, and that it 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 makes for a very positive life. So yeah, I mean, the girls, if I had one piece of advice, and we live our life by one mantra, and I said this earlier about it was way back, that conversation I had with Mike, before he passed away, just do what makes you happy. And that's why, I have a daughter who lives out in the mountains, and she's made school, work, living out somewhere that's very expensive, but in a part of our country that just fuels her soul. She's made it all work. And I completely support that because our mantra is do what makes you happy. Obviously you need to be responsible and live a life, that's going to make decisions that are going to help lead to longevity in terms of your success in your life, but be happy. That's the simplest lesson that I can offer, or the simplest piece of advice. And it was just something we lived by. And it's something we continue to foster in our home, and be present. We really relish in those moments that are just spontaneous and right there in the moment. And they're the best ones. We'll talk about them for forever.
Mm, they are. Now, before we pivot into what you're doing now to change women's lives,
Mhm.
dating. Is that something you have tapped into? You don't want to tap into?
Mhm.
Did you wait till the girl
No, I totally
you
have.
have? Okay, go.
I totally haven't, and there's an interesting, and I'm so grateful you asked this question because I really wanna share this. There were so many things I knew early on after my husband died, and one of them was that I would love again. I knew, and I knew in my heart somehow. I think it's because I had such a rich experience that I knew I would open my heart again for love. I didn't know when that would happen. I just knew at some point I'll be ready. And I had the conversation early on with somebody before I was ready, like with a therapist type of person, just asking, how is that going to work? Because I know somewhere I will at some point down the road, but right now Mike is my husband, and he still is my husband in my heart. And she gave me this incredible analogy, and I'm not gonna. I actually came from somewhere else, but I don't want to get too off track here. But the analogy was this, and I use it even when I'm dating and I talk to people about how it feels, because a lot of people will ask me, "How does it feel?" Like, it seems like you had a really beautiful relationship. I said, "I did." So how does a new person fit into your idea or in your heart when you still have this big spot in your heart for your late husband? And I equate it to having children. So I say, when I had my first daughter, you create this life and they are your everything. Having children is just, it's the sun and the moon, and you're so overcome with a love that you didn't even know. You can't compare it to anything else. And then when you're expecting your second, at least I know for me, I remember when I was pregnant thinking, how can I possibly love another one as much as I love this first one? Right. And then she came along and she was different from the first one, but I did love her just as much. And then my third one I was pregnant with, and I remember having the same feelings again. And the point is that there's always more room in your heart for love. Your heart doesn't have a limitless capacity. So there's a sacred place in my heart for Mike for sure. My children occupy, beautiful spaces in my heart, but my heart has so much room for someone new to enter, and also just for other types of love, for the work I do, for the people I engage with. My heart is so full through my experiences, and I credit that to what I had with my late husband.
Girl, that is so phenomenal and positive. I can't even
Thank you. Thank you.
see myself. Like, I've only been in love with one man. I'm 38 years old. I've only been in love with one man. I agree with what you're saying. But I guess until I'm in that situation, I won't know. But it's such a refreshing thought to share because many women have been in your shoes. This happens
Mhm.
all day, every day. It's not like it's just everyone's experience and story is different. Your husband was all the way in China. You couldn't even see, touch, or feel. Did you guys, if you don't mind me asking, did you guys like communicate every day to try to do times? Did you talk to him before, or was the last communication him getting out your car, giving you a kiss and say, "See you later, Lydia"?
No, no, the last communication was when he landed in Beijing.
Okay.
And then he had a layover there, and then he had a few days. But with time zones and whatnot, it wasn't always easy either. So probably my last communication was about 2 days into his travels, and then he died on the third day. So you know, but like I said, there was nothing left unsaid. We were actually planning a vacation, him and I. We used to carve out time for each other, and he was the travel planner in our family. So I think our last communication was actually centered around what we want to be doing. And of course, me being Mama Bear, didn't want to leave the kids for too long. So he said, "Okay, how about something, something, something?" And he gave me an idea. I said, "Super," and he goes, "Yes, let me just leave it with me." And he was so excited. So I mean, left on a really high note. He was excited about our travel plans, and that's the way it should have been. It all played out the way it was supposed to play out. I do believe that. And your point, I want to just go back to about only ever having been in love with one person, and you can't imagine. There's an interesting thing, and it's a little bit of a segue, not a segue, it's a bit of a sidebar, but I have loved again. So to your question, I have been in a relationship since my husband passed away. I was in a 2-year relationship that ended about 2 years ago. And I loved him. I did, because he was very good to me. One of the things I've learned also through my journey, not just romantic love, but just through everything I've experienced, is there are two different types of love as well. And one is it's easy to love someone because loving someone is about how they make you feel. But being in love with someone is about wanting their happiness as much as you want your own. And so I can say unequivocally, I was in love with my husband. I've never been in love with another man again. It will happen. I trust that the universe will line it up if it's meant to happen. But again, going back to the children and that analogy I drew about, there's always more room in your heart. Some people don't understand what I mean when I'm talking about love versus being in love. I'm so in love with my children because their happiness is as important, if not more than my own. So I know that I'm in love with my kids, right? So that's I think an easy way to sort of define it for yourself. If somebody's happiness is as important to you as your own, if when they're not well, it makes you sad, or when their heart is heavy and hurting, it makes your heart heavy and hurting, you're in love with that person. Versus if they just make you feel good. And listen, there's nothing wrong with just loving someone. I mean, that's a beautiful feeling too. But to be in love is just that next level of really committing your heart. And it's you either find it or you don't. You can't make it happen
Yeah, I
at
definitely
all.
do agree because I do believe there's two different ways of loving someone. I totally agree. I like how you put it. I've never heard it that way is someone's happiness. When you're in love with somebody, you care about their happiness. I've never heard it said in that way.
Mhm.
And I like that because when I think about it, you're right. I am in love with my children because their happiness is important to me. But I love my friends. Not that their happiness is not important to me, but
Yeah. Or maybe that's the different levels of the friendships you have, maybe that's the difference between your absolute best friend versus, a bunch of other friends you have, right? Because your best friend is like you guys were everything to each other, and yeah, probably if you think about it, especially growing up, I can think of some of my best friends growing up and yeah, if life wasn't going well for them, then it hurt my heart too, you know?
now once your husband passed away, you got diagnosed with cancer. How did you change your life and how did you get out of the drinking binge and wanted to help women and wanted to make this change?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to start by saying life isn't linear. You would think, based on what I shared with, and listen, this is something I've mulled about in my head so many times for a very long period of time. The journey to finding my spiritual essence, my inner spirit, knowing what it was I was meant to be doing, happened really soon after my husband died. So I started down that path and, then I got the cancer and kind of just dealt with it really quickly and said, okay, continue on this path. This is what you want to be doing. But I think because I didn't take the steps, as I mentioned before, to really healing and processing, and also because in my former life as a dietitian, most of my work experiences came to me quite easily. I didn't have to work too hard to find different things. Whereas this endeavor to go out now and speak and share a new message and all of that was a very sort of entrepreneurial endeavor, something I'd never done before. And all of a sudden, I have this business plan in front of me and my goals and my objectives. I've got my elevator pitch and my speaker one sheet and all those things. And I'm like, okay, now what? And between having to figure that out and not having really healed and dealt altogether properly, I decided to take an easy out and I got back into a corporate job as a dietitian. It literally landed on my lap. I'm like, I can do this job. Do I want to be doing it? No, but it's an easy out. Number one mistake, right? Because I'm not doing something that's serving me. And I've now put to bed something that I really want to be doing that I know I need to be doing. Um, and this is, I'm coming back to your question. I got to just kind of give you the backlog, the backstory. And then also, dating again at this point and entering into that relationship I mentioned, lovely man, treated me really well, but I knew early on, this is not someone I see myself with long term, stayed in it far longer than I should have. All these little things that I'm doing that are now like dimming my light, right? Dimming my inner light and making me feel pulling me further away from who I want to be and what I want to be doing. So again, turning to that unhealthy coping mechanism because I'm not happy, right? So it was a period of, really self-reflecting and saying, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? So I walked away from the professional situation, walked away from the personal situation. And then over time, I walked away from the alcohol, as I mentioned, because a lot of people won't do that,
Mm.
surely. They'll just say, okay, because I read something that's such a great analogy. It said, the carefree, fun decision is the easy one. The disciplined, hard one is sometimes the sad one. But when you face that sadness, what's on the other side of it is so much more fun and happy and beautiful than what was on the, flip side. So, like I said, you just gotta face your realities. A lot of people don't. I definitely have self-awareness. I am probably the most reflective person you'll ever meet. I've been told many times over that I'm really hard on myself, and that's okay. You know what? And I'll tell you why. My kids deserve a mom who is her best self, and I deserve a woman who is her best self. And I think if you can honestly wake up every day and look in the mirror and say, I'm really proud of you and I love who's looking back at me, wow, like what an achievement. And that doesn't mean that hard things won't happen and that I will always be my very best self. But what it means is that I've put the work in and I know how to get to a place where I feel really peaceful and grounded and centered. And that's the holy grail.
How do you like entrepreneur life now? Doing what you do?
Well, still working through what that looks like. I'm still working through what that looks like, and I will say where I'm hard on myself when it comes to the entrepreneur life is I don't have that business plan sitting in front of me saying, okay, these are your goals and objectives for the next 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years. This is what you want to achieve. I'm coming at it from a different perspective, and that is to make a difference in the lives of other people. And I know by doing the work that I'm doing and getting out there and sharing my story, offering workshops, keynotes when the world opens up again, that is my sweet spot. I love being on a stage, speaking to people, writing. As I mentioned, I'm published and I'm currently working on my own book, which is going to be my legacy piece. That is kind of my ultimate goal. But, as I'm doing all of this, I know because I'm doing it from my heart and with passion, the money will follow. So my priority really is about creating impact, inspiring, empowering, making a difference, even if it's just one life at a time. And it started with my own life, right?
Girl, you impact. You're so graceful with your conversation.
Oh,
You didn't even shed a tear. Mind you, everyone grieves differently. And I know behind closed doors, you probably cried many times. But
oh yes.
but it's like you're just so graceful in your words and how you talk about Mike. You don't mind me saying his name.
Oh, please.
It's
Yeah. No,
like
I love hearing
you
it.
speak as though Mike is still in the present, Lydia. Do you realize that? Like when you talk,
I do.
if you didn't tell me he was deceased, I wouldn't think he was deceased because you speak as though as he's still here with us, which is not a bad thing. But I'm not used to hearing that.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like I don't even know if it's a decision, to be honest with you, Shirley. I just feel it's just how it is. I will say this. Um, it probably will prove to be a challenge moving forward. Um, if I do move forward in romantically with someone else, because yeah, he's still very much a part of my life, my heart. I do have a connection to him, so I think it will take a very unique person to be able to be okay with that. He's not. It's not in. I think it will just take someone who's spiritually evolved and really understands that. Yeah, we are connected to those that have left this earth, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
We'll see. We'll see. But I can't change the relationship I have, nor do I want to.
I don't think you should. And even when that
Yeah.
unique person does come around, you will make sure that person is understanding. And I don't think what you feel for Mike will ever go away, even when that unique
I
person.
don't either.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that. And, I've said this many times, and I believe this is probably the truest thing I could say from my heart is that I'm so blessed with what we share together, physically, like in our lives together, and equally blessed with what I've come to learn about myself and how I've grown and the relationship that we've shared in his passing. And I have known such great love on both sides. that if I never experience that kind of love again, that's okay, because I think what I've experienced is greater than most people ever get to recognize. If I do get to experience something similar again, I've done something really good to deserve that. That's the way I look at it.
That is so sweet. So I want you to leave our listeners what one positive motivational inspiration, especially for a woman who has lost a husband. I cannot speak from that. I don't even know what that
Mhm.
feels like.
Yeah. This is going to sound very a generalized statement, but I think it applies to people who've lost and been through difficult times, but also just that woman, that midlife wife like I was before my husband died, who was searching for something more, looking for that thing to make them happy. Just honor who you are. I would say get really, and it takes work. Just figure out what you value now at this point in your life, because your life does shift and pivot, and the things you might have valued as a young person, or that you might have valued within your family unit, that will shift and pivot as life continues to ebb and flow. So get clear on what you value and align yourself with things that allow you to bring those things into your life on a regular basis. That is the work that I do with women, getting clear on what it is your personal core values are at this moment in time, and aligning with those things so that you can show up in a way that feels really authentic and rooted in who you are.
Get clear with your values. I totally agree. I'm a huge believer in manifestation, doing what
Yes.
you believe and
Amen.
believing in what you want to do. So, I mean, it's simple. Like you said, it's going to sound like a generalized statement, but there's so much truth behind that, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. And there's work. And it's like anything else, Shirley, even once you put the work in, you have to work to maintain it.
Yes.
Right. And I always bring it back to the work I did prior to all of this as a dietitian. I could help people get to a point, where they were, at a healthy weight. But guess what? Once you arrive there, you're not done. The work isn't over.
Exactly. To maintain that weight. Oh, Lydia, thank you so much for being a guest. This was a different conversation that I never had. It was a little emotional, not a bad emotional, because there's a part of me that feels sad when you first started your story. But girl, you're like, you have so much joy inside of you. So I'm like, Shirley, shake it up. Lydia is good.
I am so good. I really am. I feel so blessed. I will say this, there was a moment in time over these past few years where I would have these moments of elation and joy, and want to pinch myself and say, okay, when is the bubble going to burst? I'm so past that, because as you just said, you used the word manifest, which is such a gorgeous word. I've manifested this, right? And it's come through a lot of conscious effort, and everybody can have this. Everybody can have it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being a guest, Lydia. And
My pleasure. Thank you so much. You are so beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. And listeners, as always, thank you for listening. And remember to love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. Till the next podcast, guys, have a great one. Thanks for tuning in to Fun Parler Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.